everything in the world eventually get used up and disappear. Things like water and the money and fame, healthy and youth, all run out someday. When we finally run out and have nothing left, we often find ourselves in a state of panic. We may not have noticed their value when we had them, but once it's gone, everything have nothing left is usually uncomfortable. Today's text said the wedding feast run out of wine. Yes, wine is a source of joy at the parties. Therefore, the saying that wine has run out means the joy has also run out. In Palestine, when they have a wedding feast, it usually lasts for a week. And the most important thing they serve is wine. 이 팔레스타인은 그 일주일 동안 예식을 하면서 손님들에게 와인을 대접하는 게 가장 값진 거죠. 가장 most value serve is wine. These days, we easily get something. If you run out of something, you can run to the supermarket and buy more. But back then, 2,000 years ago, it was tough to get something on short notice. Because the Jewish people value their honor so much. So running out of wine at a wedding feast, even with all the guests present, would have been a huge embarrassment for the host and could make them a laughing stock. People are like that. I think we might feel like we've got everything and well prepared and can live without worries. But without God's help, we often find out later that we miscalculated and come up short, leaving us feeling panic. That is why a life without God faces crisis. We need God's miracle in our life every day. Hallelujah. But fortunately, in the scene from today's scripture, Jesus and his disciples and his mother Mary were there. Mary was the first to notice the wine had run out. I think, and Mary was probably close to the family hosting the wedding. Mary told Jesus about this crisis. And he performed a miracle by turning water into wine so that the joy wouldn't fade away at the wedding. Hallelujah. In today's passage, we can discover the principles of how miracle happen and way to break through. So I hope that your life become a place where miracles happen, just like the wedding in Cana. Hallelujah. If we want to overcome all situation, and first, it's important to recognize our shortcomings. Mary, the mother of Jesus, was a spiritually sensitive person. 영적으로 마리아는 굉장히 민감한 사람이었던 것 같아요. While everyone else was enjoying the feast and eating and they drinking, she noticed that the wine has run out. We need to be aware of where the problems are in our faith lives. We should be sensitive to this. 영적으로 민감해야죠, 영적으로. Some people only realize there's some issue after it has blown up. But those who are spiritually sensitive realize the problem as soon as they realize. Mary immediately knew that was an issue. Do you remember? Like in life is nothing to be ashamed of. 가진 게 없어 부끄러운 게 아니에요. Not having money is nothing to be ashamed of. Being sick is simply being sick. 아프면 아픈 거 이거 뭐 부끄러운 거야. Not something to be embarrassed about. Some use people, I have no iPhone. It's not shame. The real problem lies in trying to hide these issues. When we have problem, but tend to everything is okay. What is problem? I'm okay, just okay. Tend to okay, everything is okay. That's when real issue arise. Sometimes our shortcomings become the tool that lead us to encounter the Lord's blessing. If there had not been a shortage of wine in today's passage, this miracle wouldn't have happened. 모자란 게 없었다면 오늘 기적이 일어나지 않았겠죠. 모자란 게 어떤 면에서는 축복이에요. 그렇죠? 모자랐으니까 예수님이 기적을 일으켰지. 모자란 건 부끄러운 게 아니라는 거예요. It was exactly because the wine ran out that God's work was revealed. We need to confess our lack to God when we find ourselves in need. John chapter 2, verse 3, when the wine was gone, Jesus' mother said to him, "They have no more wine." This is not a shame. The moment Mary confessed the lack to Jesus, so the miracle began. If we get this discouraged and give up when we are lacking, miracles won't happen. But when we come humbly before the Lord and kneeling and confessing our weaknesses, maybe our all obstacles in our lives can be overcome. Hallelujah. And secondly, a relationship with the Lord is important. So we read together John chapter 2 verse 4. Dear woman, why do you involve me? Jesus replied, my time has not yet come. The Lord asked his mother Mary, who requested the miracles, woman, why do you involve me? This is a question. Do you understand? This is a question about relationship. He's asking, why is my relationship with these people who have run out of wine? Please remember, God doesn't perform miracles for just anyone. There are countless people walking down the street, maybe each with their own stories. 다 사정이 있겠죠? Some of them might be facing urgent problem that truly need miracles. 어떤 사람은 진짜 그중에 기적이 필요한 사람이 있을지도 몰라요. But God doesn't just go to them and perform miracles. Why? Because there is no relationship. But thankfully, God is a father to you and me. Amen? So Romans chapter 8, verse 15. For you did not receive a spirit that makes you a slave again to fear, but you received the spirit of sonship. And by him we cry, Abba, Father. In Galatians chapter 4, verse 6, because you are sons, God sent the spirit of his Son into our heart, the spirit who calls out, Abba, Father. In Jesus' eyes, the problem itself is not important, but the relationship matters more important. To the Lord, it's not about what problem do I have, but rather what is my relationship with you. This is very important. Miracles are not about the content. They're about the relationship. We often ask God to just fix this issue. Hurry up, 빨리, God, please. But God tells us to first set our relationship right. He tells us to draw closer to God. Actually, God doesn't need much time to perform miracles. Do you understand? Yeah. God doesn't need much time to perform miracles. 기적을 일으키는데 하나님 사실 시간이 필요하지 않아요. In an instant, He can turn water into wine. In an instant, heal your diseases and resolve your material issue right away. But the problem is that it takes time for us to change. 우리가 변화되는 시간이 필요해서 하나님 기다리고 계시는 거예요. Therefore, when God performs miracles, the biggest issue is not God Himself. It's actually me. Another hint in today's passage is the word time. My time has not yet come. Miracles require God's timing. Yes, we often ask God to fit our timeline, seeking immediately solution because we feel urgent. But God is the one who waits for the right time. He knows the exact timing and season. Look at Abraham. He received the promise of the son at 55 years old. 75세에 아브라함이 약속받았죠? But Isaac was born when he was 100. Each day was urgent for Abraham as they grew older. And Sarah aged also. Yeah, God didn't give Isaac when Abraham needed him most. He gave him at the time God deemed necessary. 하나님이 생각하는 때에 준 거지 아브라함이 원하는 때에 준 게 아니라는 거예요. If God has given Abraham a child earlier, think about it, he might be claiming it was by my own strength. He wouldn't have been surprised. My own strength. I have a child. In fact, Abraham did have Ishmael when he was nearly 90 years old by his own strength? We often receive answer from God. Yes, I also receive answer from God. 응답을 많이 받아요. But later mistakenly think we did it ourselves. That's why God gave Isaac to Abraham and Sarah when the odds of them having a child was 0. 100% 승산이 없을 때 줬어요. He wanted them to know that it was 100% God's gift. Dear members, do you need a miracle? And maybe. The Lord is telling us what we need first is a relationship. At last, obedience is important. We must obey God's word to overcome every situation. Hallelujah. We must obey God's word to overcome every situation. In John chapter 2, verse 5, his mother said to the servant, do whatever he tells you. The Mary instructed the servant to do whatever Jesus said. And the Lord gave the servant 2 commands. The Lord gave the servant 2 commands. The first was to fill the jar with water. 첫 번째 명령이 뭐예요? 항아리에 물을 채우라. 첫 번째 명령. First command. This jar was a stone jar used by Jewish for ceremony washing. Traditionally, Jews would wash their hands before meal or after returning home. You know, the practice served as both a hygienic action and religious ceremony. 이게 손 씻는 거. In special banquets home, 이 잔치하는 그 집이, as they also prepare many stone jars so that the guests could wash their hands and feet as they enter. Suppose with 6 stone jars, was it difficult for the servants to fill the jar? Very easy, because they're working every day. Yes, it's what they do every day. 하는 일이잖아요, 원래. Very easy. So the Lord asked them to fill them, the servant, confidently fill the jar to the brim. 꽉 채웠어요, 그냥. However, second command, the problem arises next. Draw some water and taking to the manager. Do you understand? Draw some water, not wine. If wine already turned into wine, very easy. But not yet turned, just plain water. Draw some water. That was the problem. The manager is an expert in events and may likely had a sense of the situation, worrying about how to handle the fact the wine had run out. Maybe he think about it. In such a moment, what will happen if the servant bring the plain water? Are you joking? Maybe servant will get beaten up. At the time, they don't know who is Jesus. Because this is first time miracles. Jesus had not yet performed any official miracles, which made it even more difficult for the servant to obey his word. If he had already healed the sick, maybe Jesus already performed a miracle a lot. Yeah, they would have heard those stories and found it easier to obey him. Okay, Jesus, I know you are a miracle man. However, in this situation, they did not know much about Jesus. However, these humble servants truly warm Jesus' heart. 예수님 마음을 따뜻하게 했어요. They brought the plain water to the master of the banquet, just as he instructed. And it's right at the moment the water was turned into wine. Believe that. Hallelujah. I've noticed 3 types of people when it comes to what the Lord asks of us in church ministry. 교회 일을 하다 보면 이렇게 명령할 때 3가지 타입의 사람이 있어요. 3 type of person. First, there are those who filled up just moderation. Do you know moderation? 적당히. They cannot say no. 안 한다는 말을 안 해요. They can't say no due to pride or fear. So they do it, but only halfway. Not perfectly. These people receive a little response, I think. Don't get more than that. The Lord maybe bless them only half. And then, second time, there are those who pretend to do it. 하는 척만 하는 사람이 있어요. They are not actually doing anything. They just act like they are. These people receive no response at all from Jesus. Even the Lord seemed to just tend to respond. 하나님도 주는 척만 할 거예요, 아마. It feels like something might happen, but nothing really does. The Lord gives them nothing. But, however, there are those who like the servants today. 그런데 뭔지 모르지만 순종하는 사람이 있어요. I don't know. I cannot understand. But I just obey. Today's scripture, the servant filled the jar to the brim and bring them to the banquet. There are people who faithfully obey whatever they are told to do. God will pour out His blessing and overflow to blessing those who are obedient. When God blesses, God blesses, nearly God blesses, it's at least 30, 60, or even 100 times more. 하나님은 조금 주는 적이 없어요. 우리는 요것밖에 안 했는데 하나님은 30배, 60배, 100배로 주시는 거예요. I hope you all become fully obedient in your faith. Hallelujah.